Hare Krishna, dear devotees, and welcome back to our final session. What is the difficulty with French books? This session will be facilitated by His Grace Mukundanghri Dasa. As introduced earlier, Mukundanghri Prabhu is the Executive Director at BBT Africa. Africa has the largest speaking French population in the world, and panelists will discuss the challenges around supplying and printing of French books and investigate possible solutions. Welcome again, Mukundanghri Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, thank you for having me back. Bonjour, Hare Krishna. Thank you, Divyangana, for leading us into this final and third session of the 12th Annual BBT Africa Conference. I'd like to welcome everyone back on board for this final session. And this is a very important session, an important discussion that we are having. What is the difficulty with French? It's a challenge that we have faced for some time. And I have two exceptional panelists with me to discuss this important topic. I would first like to introduce His Holiness Bhakti Carudesna Maharaj. His Holiness Bhakti Carudesna Maharaj is a disciple of His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. And Bhakti Carudesna Maharaj has done extensive preaching in our Francophone region of Africa, particularly West Africa, propagating Srila Prabhupada's movement, spreading through book distribution. And Maharaj is actually the prime advocate for the French book issue that we have been facing in the continent over the last decade or so. Welcome, Maharaj. Bonjour. Comment allez-vous?
Bonjour. Très bien. Okay, thank you.
Ça va bien. Next, our second panelist, as introduced earlier, we have His Grace Govardhana Prabhu. He is our senior BBT Africa trustee. He's also the co-GBC for ISKCON South Africa. And Govardhana Prabhu, of course, has led the African BBT for some time, right from its inception. And Govardhana Prabhu has extensive institutional knowledge when it comes to this matter of French book supply in Africa. We're sure that Govardhana Prabhu's contribution and insight into this matter is going to be invaluable for this discussion that we are about to have. Bonjour, Govardhana Prabhu. Comment allez-vous?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So, Krishna Gyan Prabhu, I'd like to open up this discussion first with a few numbers that I'd like our audience to look at to firstly place this discussion, set it off. So, as Divyangana alluded to earlier in our opening, French is one of the main languages that we find on the continent. And in fact, the French population on the continent numbers at 141 million. But before we actually get to that statistic, we showed this map of the ISKCON footprint that we have on Africa. Now, to the left of your screen, we have our West African region, which predominantly consists of Francophone or French-speaking countries, okay? Now, French is the second most spoken language on the continent, behind Arabic. And if we go to our next slide, you'll actually see this statistic displayed. We have 141 million Francophone speaking people on the continent. Africa is by far has the largest population of French speakers in the world. In comparison, the country of France, with a population of just under 70 million people, has less than half of that French-speaking population. Yet, thank you, KJ, yet we are faced with the challenge that we are unable to procure and unable to print French books for this vast African population, particularly those situated in the West African region, as we pointed out earlier. So this is the context in which the world is with regards to the spread of French-speaking people, and this is the spread of French-speaking people on the continent. In 2013, His Holiness Bhakti Carudesna Maharaj brought up this issue at our conference in Mauritius. Maharaj raised the fact that they are unable to secure French books, and whatever French books that they can procure, usually they are faced with the challenge of having to clear from ports, which is another challenge on its own with regards to logistics in the African region. So Africa has very unique circumstances and very nuanced challenges that are faced. So I want to kick this off. Now that we have an understanding, the fact that the center of the French-speaking language in the world now rests in Africa. Africa has literally the largest population of French-speaking people. So I want to first start with you, Bhakti Carudesna Maharaj, because for us to actually have an appreciation of the challenges that you have faced and the devotees in the region have faced due to a lack of French books, we'd like to hear from you, what is the story of what is happening at grassroots level? What is happening with regards to the devotees who actually face this challenge of not having French books?
Hare Krishna. Om Madhyanam Timnadasya Janashrapaya Kastumaitam Namaha Mukam Kuloti Vachanam Pangam Nagati Sripataham Vande Gurum Vyasanam Namaha Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Community Namaste Saravasdeve Gauravani Krishna Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Bhakti Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivoda Gaur Bhaktavita Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare Ram 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 Hare. Okay, thank you very much, Mukundanghri Prabhu. Yes, this is this issue we have been talking about since many years, and I'm very happy we are discussing about it again on this 12th annual BBT conference. Hopefully, that will be the last discussion. It will help to really move forward. Yeah. The situation is very pathetic because you see, last time in Mauritius and South Africa also, I raised the issue that even since I joined ISKCON, I've never seen new French book printed. I mean, like the old books that we have, Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, part 1, part 2. Srimad Bhagavatam, third, fourth canto, third canto. That's all. Since I joined ISKCON in Côte d'Ivoire, the book I've been seeing. And also they have the same Chaitanya Charitamrita. Okay? So first we have issue of titles, different titles. For instance, I joined ISKCON with a nice book. This is called La Solution pour un œil de fer. In French, I think it's the Science of Self-Realization. And also the book, the the sense of reincarnation. So these are books in the African zone, we like this kind of startups, you know, reincarnation, mysticism. So many of us, we join ISKCON through those books. Yeah. So now we are lacking different varieties of titles, only same titles, particularly since many years. Okay. And when I was on Facebook, some friends, when they saw the post that they are going to do this conference, one of my friends sent me a message that, look, Mahat, this is not, the difficulty is not with French books. The French book is not the issue. It is the system. It is the system. So the main point is about as Mukundanghri said, the clearness of the books. You know, the system. What I mean by system, I mean that don't forget that we are in this material society, and not everybody is a Vaishnava. No, we are practicing Krishna consciousness in the material world, and majority of people are not devotees. So, you know, in terms of business, ISKCON is not controlling the port of the world, especially in West Africa and especially French-speaking countries. I'll tell you that, for instance, the port of Côte d'Ivoire and Togo, they are own, practically speaking. On the paper, it is the port of Ivory Coast and Togo, but practically speaking, that port belongs to France. Any goods you want to order from other countries, first of all, must transit to France. If you are lucky that they arrive in Ivory Coast, then France have something to say about those goods. They will take in some useless and unnecessary taxes, and you find yourself with big amount of money to pay for clearing. I remember the last, I think, 3 or 4 years, we got Prabhu from America. He sent us 5,000 copies of books of Beyond Birth and Death. 5,000 copies to Ivory Coast, Côte d'Ivoire, 5,000 copies to Togo, and also I think 5,000 copies to Congo. Okay, so first of all, I sent a message that the invoice should be sent on our postal address, because when the invoice comes, it's cheap. I mean, it's free. Just go and collect it. But to my surprise, I've been checking the post office. I didn't get anything. To my surprise, I got a message that I have an invoice at DHL. That is the first headache. DHL will never release that invoice unless we pay almost more than $200 just invoice, just to start. Okay. Now, okay, I was very, very mad, very angry. I didn't want to pay that. I said, our books are there. I must pay. So I sacrificed to pay. I wasn't happy. Then, after we paid that, then the next issue now is out to bring the books out of the port. When we meet the clearance agents, we went different places to get the cheaper one. That the cheaper, I will tell you the price. You'll be surprised. We spend almost like 1,700, 5,000 copies of books. Okay, if you pay this big amount, how much can we sell one book and save some money and pay back BBT? Africa. So the point is that we have to spend a lot of money to clear those books. I was discussing with Mukundanghri Prabhu, was giving me so many options, like printing cheaper in India or maybe South Africa. Well, printing is cheaper price is a progress. I appreciate, but the same problem will remain because I don't know if the books come from South Africa and they will become cheaper. But the main issue is about hearing. Very,
Maharaj,
very, very, yes.
I think it's so important for us to actually appreciate the level of difficulty you've had.
Yeah.
And just hearing that story gives us a sense of some of the challenges that you have faced and gone through to be able just to secure a small quantity of books. And this really brings in nicely His Grace Govardhana Prabhu. And it's essentially the same question, Govardhana Prabhu. And I want us to look, for you at least, to look at it for us from the institutional level. What is the challenge here? Why are we not able to service this region in Africa with these books as the BBT?
Maharaj, thank you very much for your explanation, a real practical explanation. And Mukundanghri Prabhu, thank you for the question. I think in all fairness, I have an admission to make. BBT Africa has failed the French-speaking devotees to facilitate successfully French books. And there's multiple reasons for that. It wasn't due to a lack of trying. But as you may be aware, there's a global BBT, and the global BBT, synergizes the efforts of the various BBTs in the world. So things like bulk printing or things like you contribute to a global fund, it supports the work of the global BBT. So there's a very symbiotic, cooperative relationship that exists because there are interdependencies between different BBTs in the world. However, the French question has evaded us because the African BBT doesn't have a license to print French books. Now, I saw the map that Mukundanghri Prabhu had put up, and it clearly makes the case. It's almost, I think the case that the BBT Africa is presenting is just rational that BBT Africa should have a license to print these books in those countries where they are needed. And there's very good reason for that, and I just want to reiterate, Marge, what you're saying. Over the years, talking about institutional memory, this is what I've heard, that there's no French books on African soil. This language is spoken in 34 countries of the roughly 54, that's about 63%. So this non-availability is a tedious legacy issue. Today, we are at the 12th BBT Africa conference. 11 other occasions disappeared on the agenda, the unavailability of French books. It's a burning issue, burning, unresolved issue. We don't even have pamphlets, not a single pamphlet in French language in Africa. So in essence, a total blackout. Yet, by the year 2050, 700 million French speakers will be in the world, 80% will be in Africa. So there's a case to be made for us to represent our case, to give, more substantiated and, another effort of trying to convince our counterparty BBTs that there is very practical benefits to printing in Africa. Firstly, it costs cheaper. As Marge has just pointed out, the logistics is a nightmare, bringing through African ports. And it has a price-raising effect. On 5,000 copies, $1,700. I mean, it just increases the price unaffordably. Then there's difficulty getting these books through African ports, as we know. And, even if we bring these books in that are translated and we pay for them, the local variation in pronunciation and vocabulary tells us that these books need to be translated in these different countries. Also, I was looking this morning at the exchange rate of the West African currency, the West African franc, 567 to $1. Again, the economics are not there. It makes it unaffordable. And, BTG is a good example. BTG, South Africa is 50% of the world's order. So we made representations. We print BTG in South Africa because 50% of the customer base is here. So we're looking for a similar solution with French books. And I think Srila Prabhupada will expect us to find a solution. We cannot go beyond this conversation for another few months without having this matter resolved. It's really become now a very, very serious and critical matter to be dealt with. And all these reasons are not reasons that we are, just presenting. We've presented them before. But I think it requires some kind of strategy that somebody either get a license or get permission to print in these countries because it also contributes to those local economies. So Mukundanghri Prabhu, that's a bit from my institutional memory of what has gone on here. And again, Maharaj, I apologize to you profusely. I know you work very closely with BBT Africa for English-speaking books, etc. We failed you with French books. The French yatra will not grow without books, because what makes the yatra grow is books. And we have to find a solution.
So Govardhana Prabhu, thank you so much for illuminating that side of the challenge from the institutional point of view. I think we need to shed more light on this, and we have spoken about how there is a sense of failure from the African BBT with regards to lack of delivering these books to our fellow African devotees. But could you perhaps, for a minute or two, just try to explain to us what efforts has BBT Africa gone to try and remedy this problem? Of course, we stated right at the beginning of this that His Holiness Bhakti Carudesna Maharaj first brought this to light to us in 2013. It's now 2021. What have been the means and channels that BBT Africa has resorted to? And have we exhausted all of those channels so that everyone in our audience has a clear understanding of what has been done to remedy this situation?
You see, each BBT in the world has a responsibility for particular languages. So there's a kind of mutual understanding that you wouldn't print languages that are not under your care. But there are exceptions. In Africa, we print English language books, and we put a sticker at the back saying only for distribution in Africa. So we were trying to get that kind of dispensation where we print French books only for distribution in Africa. That didn't work out. We had then formed a French council in Mauritius at the Mauritian conference, but it was stillborn. It showed some promise, and it constituted the relevant stakeholders were on that. It was very short-lived. Any strategic initiative needs an engine room. Now, if your hands are tied in this particular matter, you don't have the authority to act or to do something. All you can do is plead and beg and request and make the case. And we've done all of that. So we've pretty much exhausted different avenues that are normally available to us to try and help remedy the situation. But I do think that, just think about it, right? This French language is spoken in Benin, Burkina Faso, Burundi, Cameroon, Comoros, the Republic of Congo, the DRC, the Ivory Coast, Gabon, Guinea, Equatorial Guinea, Madagascar, Mali, Niger, Central African Republic, Rwanda, Senegal, Seychelles, Togo. Even in Mauritius, there's a dose of local dialect and normal French. So it's dominantly on the African continent. And under these circumstances, one size doesn't fit all. I think that particular idea of BBT having a particular dispensation in a particular area has to be relaxed for Africa. And, we could make other representations to the authorities to see if they would allow local printing, so long as it stays within the borders of Africa.
Thank you, Govardhana Prabhu. I think both yourself and Bhakti Carudesna Maharaj alluded to something that is critical for us to pause and think about as fellow African devotees on this continent in order for us to actually solve this. And that is, are we prepared and organized enough to actually fulfill this mandate of printing and distributing French books if those permissions were granted. So I want to bring up this next slide over here, which goes to show the importance of French. Now, this graphic over here goes to speak about just how vast the African continent is. And if we take a look at the West African region in particular, the entire West African region is basically the size of the United States. That's just West Africa. So when you have the logistical challenges that Bhakti Carudesna Maharaj is dealing with over a very expansive region, the question we have to ask ourselves is, do we have the infrastructure on the ground? Do we have the manpower, the skill to be able to deliver these books if permission were available to the African BBT to print these books locally? So I want to ask that question to you, Maharaj. How can we organize our efforts? And to what extent are our efforts already organized in the West African Francophone region?
Yeah, see, this is technical issues. I think this is from your side. But what I can say is that if you want to print books, really decide to print them, we can arrange in such a way that we can print the quantity that can be handled easily. Yes. For instance, they are talking about maybe a warehouse, big warehouse to keep all those books. But we can still discuss and think about all those things. This is the logistics. You start to think. But first of all, the most important thing is to have the access of the French books locally. That's this first request. Now, if that's okay, then we can study together the next things, the next step, how to keep the books and everything. Right now, I cannot tell you that because so many years we didn't have those books. Actually, just today, I cannot give you the answer today. You need to be planned. Let's think about it. And if it is decided that okay, the French book can be printed now, then together with you, we can also discuss how what will be the arrangements for those books when they will come.
Yeah, and Govardhana Prabhu, this is an important question for the BBT to be asking itself, because a lot of the rebuttals to the idea of Africa having a license to print its own books is that Africa just doesn't have the organization, the manpower, the skills, or whatever it is to do this for themselves. Therefore, let us do it for you. Is BBT Africa planning to have organized efforts? What can we do to support actually having the right infrastructure, systems in place, administration in those regions so that this can practically be done?
I think it would be fundamentally wrong to say that BBT Africa may not have the human or physical capacity to roll out French books. BBT Africa has functioned now for 12 years. It's a significant entity. It's sufficiently capitalized. It's networked across Africa. It's built up from the ground. Previous to that, it functioned as an agent almost. Book distribution was done through an entity that didn't publish books. It's manned by a voluntary team of professionals, none of them who are paid. It functions under the guidance of a veteran BBT person, His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami Maharaj. So there is no technical inability to produce the book. We don't have any of those inhibitions. The difficulty is you got to have legal consent, because we function respectfully between BBTs, and that's Srila Prabhupada's desire. But it's also Srila Prabhupada's desire to see his books distributed everywhere. Even if there's difficulty initially in the French areas, we have Shastra Dan, a very developed an entity affiliated to BBT here in Africa, who's got real capacity that can assist and facilitate these French books. And essentially, Srila Prabhupada said any book printed in Africa in an African language should be sold at cost. And BBT has been doing that. Unlike the normal pricing, BBT doesn't mark up African language books. So the same dispensation can be there to build up the French inventory, build up capacity and training. And that's what BBT is meant to do. As I was saying, by the year 2050, you're going to have such a huge population of French-speaking people in Africa. We've got to start that process now. Because if we don't do it now, we're losing ground. Just consider, I think I saw the numbers the other day. From our book distribution numbers, we do about 300,000 books a year, all in English. But that's to about 12% of the English-speaking population across Africa. The French-speaking population is 13%. So just logically, if we open up the French yatras and we flood them with books, you could hypothetically double your book distribution. Now, there's so much of effort globally to distribute books, and we are all committed to the cause of book distribution, but you've got to have the books to distribute them. Now, one might argue and say, well, you can get French books online. I suspect that many of these West African countries may not have that facility or that access to that facility. They want the physical books printed in those countries, with the French and the local dialect, the way it can be translated by local people. And that's fundamentally the function of the African BBT. So now you have a difficulty. You cannot execute your primary mandate. Your primary function cannot be executed because you don't have the legal ability to do that. And that, Mukundanghri Prabhu, is fundamentally the hurdle that needs to be crossed. All the other things are really secondary. We've done English books, we've printed many English books and many other local African language books, to the quality and standard that's required by the BBT. Yeah?
Yeah. Thank you, Govardhana Prabhu. I think that's a resounding yes. BBT Africa is ready, willing, and waiting to print these books. Just give us the green light and we can do it. And Bhakti Carudesna Maharaj, I want to touch back on moving away from the bureaucratic and the institutional level for a moment. I want to understand from the human level, the devotees dedicated to spreading Srila Prabhupada's movement in West Africa. What is the current state of book distribution? What books are the devotees distributing in Togo, Benin, Côte d'Ivoire? What is happening? And how do these devotees actually feel about not having the tools to perform Sankirtan?
Yes, of course, they feel that, because for many years, the same, book that they have been distributing, same titles. There is no variety of books. So it makes Sankirtan, not very enthusiastic. So I mentioned books like Science of Self-Realization, Science of Reincarnation, Love Come From Life, Higher Taste, even why not, if possible, the other cantos, because so many years people read first canto. We say we have 12 cantos. They are devoted for the other cantos. We never see, So, and if the books, different varieties of books comes, that will bring back the enthusiasm. I remember very well my early days when I joined ISKCON, many people were really enthusiastic in book distribution. But since many years now, the enthusiasm is going down year by year. Why? Because the same books, same quality of books. So if you have different varieties and access is very easy to have access of them, then that can also boost the morale of devotees, of Sangha devotees, and that will bring a change. Yeah?
You can very well imagine the negative impact on enthusiasm when you want to distribute books, but you don't have the books to distribute, or you have the same 3 or 4 books in a language that is not predominantly spoken in the region. So that is thoroughly understood. I want us to look at a point that Srila Prabhupada made about in Africa preaching to Africans and preaching for Africans, and how that statement speaks to having the practical means to do that preaching. Now, Govardhana Prabhu, and I'll circle back to Bhakti Carudesna Maharaj, isn't it contrary to the spirit and the practicality of that statement from Srila Prabhupada to not actually then either grant the means to be able to do that preaching on the continent, or acting as a complete block to that actual end, which is preaching to our fellow Africans? How can we actually look at the statement from Srila Prabhupada and understand how it might be contradicted with the current bureaucratic blocks that we are facing? Can you distill that for us?
Yeah, sure.
Because it's important for us to really understand that we are doing this as a spirit of service to Srila Prabhupada. That has to be the center of the discourse here. The essence of what we are trying to do is share the message of Godhead. So let's look at that statement, spotlight it for a second. How can we actually fulfill that when there is such a blockage?
Yeah, it's actually a violation of Srila Prabhupada's order. And there are precedents. There was once, I don't recall the details, but a Bengali language book, very similar circumstances. And Prabhupada authorized the local devotees to go ahead and print, because the higher principle was to have the book printed and distributed. Now, Srila Prabhupada put his lotus feet on African soil on 5 occasions. And he gave very unique instructions. No other BBT in the world has an instruction like this, where Prabhupada said, for any African language book, it must be sold at cost. Now, just think about that for a moment. Just reflect on that. If you only did African language books and you sold them at cost, how will the BBT work? Yet Srila Prabhupada wrote formulas for third world, and he's given, the normal formula 2.5 or 2.2 times the print cost. But here in Africa, he made concessions. So the question would be, Srila Prabhupada was able to see when he came here in 75 to South Africa, that it requires an adjustment. It requires more sensitivity. It requires some flexibility. And he gave orders, like that we should do that. You see, there are other very practical things, because the indigenous languages, French is spoken alongside them. There are cultural sensitivities. There are issues with book covers. There are issues with pronunciation. There's issues with local variations in dialect. BBT Africa is in touch with local leaders like Carudesna Maharaj. And in those countries, we're very familiar with what happens in Abidjan or in the urban areas in Cameroon or Gabon, etc. So we are presenting factual economic reasons, logistic reasons, cultural reasons, logical reasons, rational reasons, and fundamentally, Srila Prabhupada himself said that this is what should be done. So this matter, the fact that it's remained deadlocked for over a decade, I think is extremely concerning. It's for myself. I feel it's my greatest failure in my service to Srila Prabhupada. And we've tried many permutations of what could be a solution. And respectfully, there are views on the other side, and they're good views. They are good arguments. But given the unique circumstances that we face here in South Africa and in Africa, we have to do something extraordinary to unblock this, to make sure we are able to print French books. I mean, I'm saying we can't even do a French pamphlet. Can you imagine how Srila Prabhupada would react to something like that? Srila Prabhupada, his divine words, he spent so much of time taking them out of Sanskrit, etc., and putting them into the English language. And he wanted it from the English language, to make sure it goes to every person on the planet. We are an evangelistic society. That's really our duty. It's everyone's duty to be alarmed by this. It's everyone's duty to feel concerned about this. So yes, Mukundanghri Prabhu, you're quite right. I feel, and also recently I've been appointed a GBC for some countries in Africa. Madagascar is my area, one of French-speaking countries. Mauritius, I'm also taking care of Mauritius. And now when I visit these countries shortly, I can assure you that this matter is going to come up again. So now, also being a GBC, I have a double responsibility, both as a BBT person and a GBC person, to try and help unblock this matter, because it's a real dilemma. Yeah.
Thank you, Govardhana Prabhu. I want to ask you one important thing before I ask Bhakti Carudesna Maharaj to close off for us. And that is, what is the timeline to resolve this? When will we have this solved? As you mentioned, it has been more than a decade. And His Holiness Bhakti Carudesna Maharaj has expressed his fatigue in constantly bringing this up every single BBT Africa conference. It's a tough question, but we are here to face those tough questions because we have an African constituent which BBT Africa at the end of the day is responsible for serving.
Shakespeare once said, much rain will wear the marble. I don't know how much more rain. I don't even know if there's a marble there anymore, 10 years is a very long time. It's a decade. It stands out as a red flag. It's the greatest failure of the African BBT. And frankly, we're embarrassed. I mean, who could possibly stand before Carudesna Maharaj and all the devotees in Court of War and look them in the eye, and all they're asking you to do is what is fundamentally the service we are meant to do for Srila Prabhupada. So we can persevere. I think we need a tactical and strategic plan. We need to appeal to the authorities again with the kind of rationale we are presenting. We need to widen the circle. We need to get more devotees joining the call. It's a very important call. And if you're asking me for timeline, we should do this immediately and see what comes of it. And, if there's no response to it, and of course we can pray to Srila Prabhupada. Ultimately, this is all Srila Prabhupada's books. The language is just a translation, but it's the content is Srila Prabhupada's words. And I don't think Srila Prabhupada's words could be monopolized by any constituency. So it requires a bit of boldness, I think, with due respect and the utmost humility. I think we all feel like that as Africans on the African continent. We are humble billion people who live here. But that humility, you know, the thing is, giving Krishna to the jiva, to the conditioned, entangled jiva, is the highest service anyone could possibly do. Now what we have, we've impeded that. Persons who speak French and no other language may never get to know who Lord Chaitanya is, may never get to know who Lord Nityananda is, may never get to know who Srila Prabhupada is. And I place that in front of the body of Vaishnavas in the world and ask them, is this right? Is this right? Is there an incident anywhere in the world that can be recorded in Srila Prabhupada's pastimes where such a situation has gone on for 10 years without resolution? I don't think you would find such a situation. So, you know, I think we can have more consultations and discussions, but we have to register our frustration. We have to register our concerns in a more formal way. We have to do that. We have a duty to do that. If we don't do that, it'll be the biggest failure.
Yeah. Maharaj, you have the final word. And as you formulate the final words around this topic, I want to say that the stage is yours. You are front and center in front of a global audience with the authorities and the powers that be that have the ability to give us these permissions to be able to serve you. What is your appeal to those authorities, to the Vaishnavas watching around the world? 10 years we've been here. And we asked Govardhana Prabhu, what is the timeline? And he said immediately. So Maharaj, the stage is all yours. Tell us what you need and when you need it.
Okay, thank you. You see, the same thing again, I would say. I'm happy that you are bringing this Srila Prabhupada statement on the floor. Yes, I also remember that Prabhupada said that, I don't recall exactly where, but Prabhupada said, distribute free prasad and free books in Africa. Yeah. So, for instance, I'll tell you something. That, for instance, we are preparing to do Bhakti Shastri in West Africa, French version. Since last 3 years, Srivas Dasvanachari has registered the Bhakti Shastri locally in West Africa. So we have been conducting Bhakti Shastri in English since last 3 years. So this year we want to start the French Bhakti Shastri. I already on contact with some French teachers. Now again, the problem is Nectar of Devotion. The only copy we got since I joined ISKCON, Nectar of Devotion, only one copy. I also one copy of Nectar of Instruction. We have some copies, some few copies. Okay, Bhagavad Gita we can manage. That Nectar of Devotion, Nectar of Instruction. How can we do Bhakti Shastri? And also, are we? If you cannot French locally, do we have a right also to translate? This is another question also. Huh? So my appeal is that it's like someone is sick, and there are too much protocols in bringing the medicine. Somebody is sick in Africa, and you're making arrangements to bring medicine from Europe. It's delaying. Why not giving the opportunity to those people on the ground who need the thing? Yes, bringing books from Europe is okay. That would delay. First of all, we have to spend money there, and we have to get money to buy, spend money to ship them, and again money to clear them. 3 headaches. Why not making the situation easy? It's very practical. I don't think Srila Prabhupada will be hungry. He will be rather happy, because what the point is, all the books are going up in the houses of people. So the point also I'm making also is about titles, different titles, and if for instance, Narayani Mataji and I forgot his name of this taboo, they always send me emails, about new quotation of prices. I always see the email. I don't respond. I'm tired of responding because it's the same thing. Even if the book is free, I'm saying, if the books even are free of charge and they come through the port, how to play them? I remember one time one custom officer, I told him, look, these books, they are religious books. We are a non-profit organization. So yes, even the Pope himself wants to pass his Bible, he will say the Pope himself. As I told him. You see, so it's not a joke. They don't care if you are religious, especially they don't know this is our Hare Krishna movement. They may be Christian or Muslim, okay. That Hare Krishna from India. So what they have been saying since 10 years, I think Govardhana Prabhu has given so much reasons why we have to print the books. And also we on the ground, yes, it's the most practical things. The most practical things that we can do to help French countries. Yeah. Try to fight for that. I'm very happy. They've been fighting for many years also. Then let's see what to do now to make things happen. Remember, I told you that I've been saying, I asked you the question. I'm going to speak about this book again, about French books. Why should I say? And I've never said. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I thank you very much for your efforts. But I think this conference is, I think, should be the last one. The last one, so that we can solve this issue. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Maharaj. I really appreciate your words. There's a question here from a member of our audience, and we can see it there. Are French books translated for the European market suited for the African market, considering that there are many different dialects spoken on the continent? It's a very nice question. Maharaj, could you explain this to us, because you would know better? Are those books different? Is the dialect of French we speak here in Africa different from the French in Europe?
Oh yes, the man in French countries, the dominant language is French. Yeah, it's not like English countries where people are more used to local dialects. In French countries, most of the French countries, they speak French. So if the French books are the same French they speak in Europe, the same French also we speak here, and the other dialects. First of all, when we have enough French books, then we can also think how to translate those books in other dialects. But first of all, the priority is the French books themselves. If the French books come, then next is to see how we can it's time how we can think of translating in other dialects. Like we have books in Creole, books in many South African languages. That's possible. But for now, French, the main thing is French book.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Maharaj. There's a second question here from our audience, and I'll throw this one to Govardhana Prabhu. In that Mauritius conference, 2013, that was, we formed a French desk, if you recall. That was one of the resolutions of that 2013 conference in Mauritius, our first conference in Mauritius. And the question that we are asked here is, a French council was formed with French leaders in Africa. What were the outcomes of this council? What happened to the French desk, Govardhana Prabhu? Did it produce anything? What were the outcomes?
Yeah, I think we had a similar kind of conversation that resulted in this committee being formed that would find a solution. Regrettably, it was stillborn, and it remains stillborn because the fundamental thing is there's the insistence of bringing books from Europe into Africa. And for all the reasons I've presented, it doesn't work, it can't work, it won't work, for all these very technical reasons. So that's why I think the council didn't progress too far, and it can't. You know, how would it find a resolution? Maharaj is saying he needs the books in Cote d'Ivoire or in Benin as we printed there, you know, at the local printing press. Now only BBT Africa can facilitate that. You don't have to go through a port. I mean, just imagine for a moment the number that Maharaj put on the table. Somebody in America, a devotee, sponsored 5,000 books. To cross the border, to cross the port where Maharaj is, the cost of that is $1,700 US. I mean, just for a moment, pause that thought. Just look at it. I mean, it's just impossible. It's impossible.
And just extending on this, because this is an important part of the discussion, Govardhana Prabhu, has there been an appetite to understand the unique challenges faced in Africa by our counterparts in Europe?
The failure may be mine, you know, and I want to apologize unreservedly to Maharaj and all the devotees in the French Yatra that, you know, I have tried. We've had tough conversations, but there are views on the other side, and, you know, respectful views, and, you know, for good reason. We just need to make the effort again. I think if we present all of these facts that we are presenting, we might get it past the line, because remember, BBTs are sovereign entities in their particular area, and they do fantastic service in those particular areas where we're starting off from such a low base. We're on bent knees, you know. It's not bent knees in terms of technical ability, but we are bent knees in the sense that we don't have, in terms of what Srila Prabhupada and how the global BBT operates, we can't just cross the line and just do something improper. That you know, that's not how. I mean, that would be irreligious. So we have to make one more effort, and I have an idea of how we're going to do this. One more effort to see if it works, and by Krishna's grace, hopefully it does. And Maharaj, then I can visit you again and look in your eye and not feel embarrassed, because I do feel very embarrassed. I really do. I feel a deep sense of failure, because it's my duty to serve you. It's my duty to make sure you have books. Books is what we exist for. You know, I became a devotee through a book, or else where would I have been today? So, I mean, these books are, you know, to let Krishna do his magic, we have to get that book in someone's hands. So we need to be able to print those books. What we're asking for, Mukundanghri Prabhu, to be very clear, we want to print these books. For example, if we print in Benin, we can road freight it across. It'll be easier, right, Maharaj? In some of those areas. We got Madagascar and Mauritius. We want the ability to print as the BBT Africa executive decides, and however the funding would work through Shastra Dan, etc., to print in those local countries, to help those local economies, and to, you know, to be able to do it in those countries. Not that we want to send books from South Africa and profit. We don't want to profit on these books. BBT Africa is in such a situation, it hardly profits on any books. Our primary objective is to get the books out. And there are many people in the world who support funding, cross-subsidizing some of these books, but they have to be printed on African soil. That is the departure point.
And then I'm just going to end off with one final comment and question here. We have a devotee, Varaha Das. I assume he's from West Africa, from his question, and he asks, I have finished translating Bhagavad Gita, Krishna book, coming back in Yoruba. I'm presently translating Christ and Krishna. The translation of Bhagavad Gita in Ewe is ongoing. Can BBT Africa print? That's the question. Govardhana Prabhu, can BBT Africa add these languages and these books to its catalog of languages already existing?
If it's in Yoruba, of course, that's a mandate we have in African languages. But if it's in French, that's the challenge. So of course, Yoruba, we must. We'll pass that across to the team immediately, and thank Varaha Prabhu for coming online and sharing that. I'm sure it must be somewhere in BBT Africa's production discussion somewhere, right? Are these books there, or is this something new?
These are new translations, so it would be in Yoruba and Ewe. So that's something we can definitely look at.
Yes, of course.
I would request Varaha Prabhu to get in touch with us. Our contact details will be shared at the end of the stream. Please do contact us, and we'd be more than happy to engage with you. There's a very interesting comment. I know I said this last one was our last comment, but I'll throw it first to you, Bhakti Carudesna Maharaj, and then finally with you, Govardhana Prabhu. It's a very punchy question, and I like these punchy questions. It reads, it seems that Africa has a begging bowl in hand, asking authorities for permission to print. Can we not just go renegade? This question is from Jean-Pierre. So Maharaj, why don't we just print our stuff? Let's just print.
Yeah, let's go. Let's do it. Let's become rebels.
Okay.
Yeah.
Govardhana Prabhu, your thoughts on Jean-Pierre's question?
You know, I'm part of the global BBT team, and I'm sure if we present it there, we'll get a positive outcome. We cannot print without a proper authority. That's the fundamental thing. Or else there'll be chaos, right, in the world. I mean, the order is established by global BBT, and we got to make our case more clearly. Maybe we haven't in the past, but the next initiative that we're making, I think, is the last throw of the dice. If that doesn't work, and then if you come back to me and ask me that question, you know, I'll join Maharaj and say, well, you know, we need to, because what are we supposed to do then? You know, we can only go, because this is a matter of spiritual life and death for many people. Yeah.
And I think this is a very real sentiment. What will a person who has been constrained, gagged and prevented from speaking do? They will rebel and try to find means to escape that sort of bondage, those restrictions. So it's a very real sentiment that I think a lot of devotees in those regions feel. So yeah, that is something important for us to consider. And thank you, Jean-Pierre, for that lovely question to end off things. Govardhana Prabhu, Bhakti Carudesna Maharaj, I'd like to thank you sincerely for your concerted efforts. I know from our personal discussions with each of you, this endeavor has not been easy. And your patience and persistence are admirable and, most importantly, needed, because we shouldn't give up this pursuit, this fight to serve the devotees and the people of Africa. As Govardhana Prabhu said, this is a matter of spiritual life and death. So I hope this message is heard and sincerely received with the utmost humility from us, but at the same time with as much determination to see a remedy to this. So we will end it there. Merci beaucoup. I would like to hand over to our Master of Ceremonies, but before we do that, I would like to introduce a lovely video by one of BBT Africa's most ardent supporters, His Grace Vaisheshika Prabhu. Of course, Vaisheshika Prabhu is the author of Our Family Business, book about book distribution. It's such an inspirational title, And Vaisheshika Prabhu is constantly involved, giving seminars and classes, interacting with devotees across this very continent of ours, inspiring and promoting book distribution. So I would like to hand over to Vaisheshika Prabhu, who has shared this message with us. Merci beaucoup. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees in Africa, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada and all glories to your services. We have a great opportunity. We're in the right yuga at the right time. We came just as Prabhupada was here, and we have service to do to the planet and all the people who live on it, to speak of all living entities. And the best service one can do is to expand the transcendental sound vibration. The way to preserve that sound vibration and make sure it gets inculcated into the minds and hearts of all living entities is through books. It's an organized way to deliver the sound. Tadvag visargo janataga viplavo yasmin prati shlokam abhadhyavatyate comes from the spiritual world, and it is meant to improve everyone. As Prabhupada says, re-spiritualize the world. The work you're doing in Africa is critical. There are over 2,000 languages. It's the second largest continent in the world. It's a palette for you to do this service to Lord Chaitanya and to Srila Prabhupada, and we can do this. In 5 years, we're going to be 5 years older anyway. And if we have a plan to incrementally increase over the next 5 years and come to numbers of books that will astound the world. Of course, the number is not as important as our developing capacity to do it together. It gives residual benefits to the entire Krishna consciousness movement. Book distribution is measurable. It's also an unassailable service. There are some principles we're working on. One of them is assume it can be done and then work backwards from there. Always assume it can be done. It can be. That was Srila Prabhupada's genius and his faith, that he knew it could be done because it is backed by Lord Chaitanya. What could be done? The Krishna conscious movement could be spread all over the world. And similarly, the map of Africa, which I saw recently and then noted that we could fill it in the way India looks filled in when we see all the points where people are organized to distribute books. And someone said, well, that's impossible. And I said, then we have to do it since it's impossible, because that's what we do. We do the impossible for Lord Chaitanya. We have to do that. Otherwise, our lives are absolutely boring and useless. So the work that you're doing there in the BBT, the work all of the Sankirtan devotees are doing there, and all the leadership is so important. It's such a key place, strategic. So please put your heart and soul into the organization of book distribution and go out just because it's the right thing to do. And the reason we set goals is what it makes of us to achieve them. And it makes everything of us and of the Sankirtan movement. So I'm very interested in Africa. I'm looking forward to having your association more and more, and to being an assistant as you develop your plan over the next 5 years to inundate Africa, to expand the number of languages, the number of points of light on that map, from which to execute book distribution all over Africa. Keep up the great work. Jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mukundanghri Prabhu. I see that you're on mute. You want to unmute your mic?
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, Prabhu, we can.
Okay. Welcome back, dear devotees. Apologies for being on mute. Thank you to Vaisheshika Prabhu, as I mentioned, for that lovely video. It was very inspirational, and we always look forward to Vaisheshika Prabhu's inspiration in book distribution. So we are very thankful to you, Vaisheshika Prabhu. We're now at the stage where we are ready to share our resolutions that come from this conference. Now, this conference has really pushed our agenda as BBT Africa with regards to key issues that we are facing in the future. So we want to sort of collate some of those issues and put them into neat resolutions for us. And based on some of the important matters that have come up, some of the notes that we've made are here as follows. Top of this list of resolutions that we'll have for the 12th annual conference is French books. We are at a point where French books and delivery, on the ground delivery of French books is imperative. And we want French books in the course of the remaining part of this year and as early as possible into next year. So the continued determination to press for BBT Africa's permission to freely print French books for the African market is top of the resolutions list. The second resolution that has emanated from our discussions here today is that we need a clear and precise, organized effort on how to plan for the future. BBT Africa needs to be ready for the growth of the African population across the various countries that were shown earlier. And we also need to meet the way in which people consume their information. So in other words, we need to future-proof, and that means planning for that future. So one of the resolutions that we have to take out of this is to have a master plan that we will publish in the first quarter of 2022. I know that there is already an ad hoc committee formed by the African BBT to meet this need. And the commitment from the African BBT is to ensure that we have a fully published master plan which has taken into consideration all of our stakeholders' feedback and views in order for us to adequately serve them. So that's the second resolution, the development of an African master plan for the next 5 years. Lastly, we need to have an innovation desk set up. This innovation desk will see to greater communication with regards to shared ideas with fellow BBTs and other networks across the continent. Some areas of our continent have such innovative and brilliant ideas that they employed. And the whole way in which we are going to move forward and advance our mission in Africa is not by reinventing the wheel each and every single time, but to be able to share those resources amongst each other. So really looking at Sankirtan from a holistic point of view. That's the third resolution that we will take out today. And we will cap it at those 3 resolutions because that is those were the most important things that arose from this conference. I think there is continued and even renewed determination to carry on translating Srila Prabhupada's books in as many languages as we can and distribute to as many people as we can. That remains a core tenet and value of the African BBT in our service to Srila Prabhupada. And with that, those are our resolutions for 2021, the 12th Annual BBT Africa Conference. They have been officially minuted. The BBT Africa team will then meet in January to formulate its strategies around these resolutions. So we thank you again, devotees, for joining us. I will now hand over to Divyangana to do our vote of thanks and close off our conference. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mukundanghri Prabhu. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. We hope that we have inspired you to take up book distribution or get involved in a small way to please Srila Prabhupada and honor his request. No event comes together without a network of devotees. We would like to thank His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami for his leadership, guidance, and support. Our gratitude to His Holiness Bhakti Chaitanya Swami and His Holiness Bhakti Carudesna Swami for your contributions to the conference. Thank you to His Grace Vaisheshika Prabhu for an inspiring message. We also would like to thank our guest speakers, His Grace Haridev Das, His Grace Srivas Das. Prabhu, thank you for joining and apologies for the technical challenges. We'd also like to thank His Grace Umapati Das, Her Grace Navina Radhika Devi Dasi, His Grace Vibhu Chaitanya Das, Her Grace Dwaraka Vasini Devi Dasi, His Grace Prem Vilas Das. Your insights and knowledge have been instrumental towards driving solutions to the challenges we face. To our facilitators, His Grace Agari Krishna Das and Bhaktin Bontle, thank you for remarkably facilitating the thought-provoking topics. To our team, His Grace Govardhana Das, His Grace Mukundanghri Das, His Grace Mahaprasad Govinda Das, and the events and marketing coordinators, thank you for your meticulous planning, dedication, and commitment to the African BBT. Our heartfelt appreciation and gratitude to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, in whose honor we are hosting this annual conference. To our online audience, thank you for your support and participation. We look forward to your continuous interactions on our social media platforms. Thank you. Hare Krishna.